keep their resolutions all year. Only 8%. Maybe, who's been one of those that's dropped it in the past? And now we don't do it anymore, right? While 43%, almost half of the goal setters have even forgotten their resolution by February. And for some reason, even though, you lose the resolution so fast, check out this last stat. 85% of people with resolutions believe their impacts will extend beyond a single year, and over half see it extending into 5 years. And yet, only 8% even make it to the end of the year. And I wanted to start with this because I hope, being a good dad or a good mom isn't just a New Year's resolution for us. Or it's not just something that I'm trying to do this year or make goals this year. Being a good parent isn't a year-long thing, right? But it's a journey or an adventure that we set out with God for at least 18 years, but for the rest of our life, right? My parents, my dad, it was really 18 years. He said it was a Georgia state law to move out at 18. And I didn't know how to check. I just know what it said, right? And so I made sure you get out by 17 and a half, you know what I'm saying? But it was an adventure that we're going on that starts now. It's not just a year thing. It's not just a resolution. It's not just a goal to be a good parent. It's not just an aspiration that we have. This is a lifestyle that we have dove into together. And so we don't necessarily need New Year's resolutions to be good parents or new goals to be good parents. But what we really need is we need to adopt some family rhythms to be good parents. And that's what we wanted to talk about today. Briefly, we're going to have a good conversation and time for us to discuss all together. But what Toy and I have been going on is saying, hey, let's not just have goals, let's really get some consistent rhythms for our family. And I like this definition of family rhythms. Family rhythms are intentional, unifying, and consistent patterns and behaviors to create a healthy and thriving environment for our children to raise up in. Where they're intentional, they're unifying, and they're consistent. It's not just a goal, it's not just a resolution for this year, but it's a lifestyle we're entering into and having rhythms for our family that our kids can grow up and raise up in. And what we're going to do is we're going to look at Deuteronomy 6, and we're going to make a few comments about this. And what we're going to have is a good chance to break into discussion groups so that we can discuss some of the rhythms we've had and share with one another and learn from one another. Have some good time as we're entering this new year where we all can learn from one another to have great rhythms in our family. Sounds good, guys? Yeah. So we'll be in Deuteronomy chapter 6 together. Is where we're gonna launch from. Here's a classic passage on parenthood and how to raise your children. But I think it's so good in the beginning of the year. In Deuteronomy 6, it says, "These are the commands, decrees, and laws the Lord your God directed me to teach you to observe in the land that you are crossing the Jordan to possess, so that you, your children, and their children after them may fear the Lord as long as you live by keeping all of his decrees and commands that I give you, and so that you may enjoy long life." And he continues down in verse 4. "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all of your hearts, with all of your soul, and with all of your strength. These commandments that I give you today are to be in your hearts, and press them on your children. Talk about them when you sit at home and when you walk along the road, when you lie down and when you get up. Tie them as symbols on your hands and bind them on your foreheads. Write them on the doorframes of your houses and on your gates." You know, as we read this passage, it's clear this isn't just a New Year's resolution. This isn't a short-term goal. No, this is a lifestyle to enter into to raise our children up together. And I just want to kind of go through those three, kind of concepts of rhythms of intentionality, unifying, and consistent. So I think it's all over this passage in Deuteronomy. So it's intentional. Impress them on your children. I don't know about you, but I'm not going to teach my children how to follow God or raise up to be high-character people unintentionally. It takes so much intentionality to teach my children to love the Lord their God. It takes so much intentionality. I'm not going to accidentally help them become loving. Someone mentioned gratitude, right? Trying to teach their child to be grateful. I'm not going to unintentionally teach my children how to be grateful. That takes a ton of intentionality. that I'm not going to unintentionally impress anything on my children, at least good stuff. I'm probably going to unintentionally impress bad stuff on my children, right? And so it takes intentionality to impress on our children. And then talk about them. The things I talk about, I don't know about you, but at the dinner table, if I'm not careful, Toya becomes the one that can keep the conversation going with our 5 and 2-year-old, and I can start to zone out. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's so easy for me to have hey, what'd you do today, buddy? Oh, great. We do highs and lows, right? Of course, it takes intentionality. What's your high? What's your low? And after that, I'm out, right? And I've tried to do my engineering kind of structure. I had 5 things I was going to ask him for the 5 days of the week, right? And then Cam, after week 2, went, Dad, I don't want to know another question, right? Because it's the same questions every week. But it takes intentionality to talk about God with our children. How intentional are you with what you're talking to your children about? Would your children know what you're impressing on them? Are you that intentional? Secondly, was unifying, right? Rhythms are supposed to be unifying for us as a family. I love this in verse 8. Tie them as symbols on your hands. Bind them on your foreheads. Whether it was literal at night, some rabbis kind of took that literally. They wore boxes with little scriptures in them, right? But the concept is, if you took that literally, and your family had the same scriptures tied around their neck, and the same scriptures on their forehead, which I don't think that was literal, but the concept, wouldn't that be very unifying? Now, it might be embarrassing for certain children, but at least it'd be a unifying embarrassment, right? But where you're unifying together over the scriptures that you are committing to. And then finally, it's consistent. Write them on your door frames of your houses and on your gates. Why is it that concept where you go in and out of your door and in and out of your gate every single day? And so what's the point of that? Abraham's saying that, or Moses is saying that you need to be consistent with these scriptures. As we're talking about rhythms, I want you to start thinking and considering for you and your family, and what rhythms do you have? And how intentional are they? How unifying are they for you and your family? And are you consistent in them? Or are they more like a New Year's resolution and then falling off quickly? You guys with me? Before Toya comes up, I think the important thing on this, guys, is Nick and I talk a lot about, Nick Shaw, we talk a lot about raising our kids. And one thing that I've noticed when talking to my friends at this life stage, and what he's noticed talking to a lot of adults of high schoolers, is sometimes it can be, the thought can come up of, well, it doesn't matter how intentional I am right now when I got little kids in the house, because they don't really understand what's going on anyways. But once they get to middle school, or especially high school, when they can start to understand God more, or make commitments to God more, then I'll get really intentional. Am I the only one that's ever thought that? Wow, y'all make me feel called out right here. I'm the only one that's ever thought that. But what Nick has shared with me, and Rita shared with me, is that they'll have conversations with the Kadinskis and other parents of high schoolers. And they'll have all these conversations with high school parents that will say, but they were the ones that waited. That said, I wasn't going to be intentional until they got old enough to figure it out. And now these high school parents are saying, I wish I would have started way back before elementary school. I wish I would have started back when they were 3, 4, and 5. I wish I would have started back when they were 2nd, 3rd, and 4th grade. They get these rhythms and these patterns and these behaviors in their life, because if you're not intentional about what you do, the truth is there are rhythms in every single household. And if you're not intentional about it, there are going to be rhythms that aren't guiding them towards the Lord. And so we don't want to be those high school parents that are looking back going, why didn't I start that way back then? Instead of thinking they were learning back then or listening back then, when in reality, as someone was sharing, man, you teach them to be grateful one day, then they're teaching you the next day to be grateful, right? Or, man, we teach them, hey, buddy, yellow lights are for slowing down. You best to believe. Every time I speed up through a yellow light, I'm getting called out by my son, right? Because they are listening. They are listening. Toy's going to come up and share more about this.
Good morning. Good to be here. Yeah, I think, as we were preparing for this, one of the phrases that I feel like the Spirit kept putting on my heart is to capture the opportunity of a lifetime. This is really the opportunity of a lifetime to be parents and raise our family and raise our children. There's this terrible thing on Instagram or that's you only have 18 summers with your children. I'm I hope not. Man, he can't come over for dinner when he's 25. What's that about, But the reality is the rhythms that our children have will be a result of the rhythms we have as parents, right? They will be a product of whatever we do. And one of the things that I love, don't be impressed, Jordan and I have only done this once, okay? Don't get excited. But we are trying this year to every first Thursday meet up, because now Caleb is in class 4 days a week. I have 4 mornings. If you guys want to hang out, text me, okay? Like, I have 4 mornings where I'm kid-free from 9 to 1. I have no idea what I'm going to do with myself. But every first Thursday, we want to go to Jay Christopher's and have breakfast and just talk about, hey, what did we say we were going to do last month? How are we doing it? That's from, one time, we were like, let's do a family devo. Kim goes, what's a family devo? We were like, okay, we're really doing great here. We gotta pick back up on that, right? But we want to check in. Hey, we said we were going to do this with the boys, with one-on-one time, with our budget, with date nights. Like, how are we doing at the list that we came up with doing? You guys are welcome to hold us accountable the first Friday of every month and ask if we did that. But yeah, it just makes me think of the opportunity of a lifetime. Most of us at work, there's a culture at our jobs. And if you have a healthy job culture, it doesn't just happen. There are team building exercises and Christmas parties, and hopefully you get a bonus and PTO, and all these things add to your experience being in that organization, to your desire to invest in that organization, and how much you want to stay and come back to that organization. Like, Google is famous for giving their people naps at work. I'm like, how do I work for Google? All of that stuff adds to your desire to bring your skill set and your talents and give it to this organization. Our children will grow up and have skill sets and talents and personalities and desires. But what's the culture of our home that we're creating to allow them to say, this is a place I want to give it to? Or is the basketball team going to be the place that they're like, actually, people hear my opinions better here than at home, right? Like, how can we foster that? And we really get the opportunity to teach our kids what it means to be in our family, which is actually a subset of God's family, right? And so it doesn't come naturally. I know we need a lot of help, but one of the prayers that a friend of mine prays that I'm trying to adopt in my life and can encourage us to pray for our families is, God, show me how good it can get. Because the world will show you how bad it can be, right? The world can show you how toxic family dynamics can be. And some of us come from family dynamics that we're like, we're not going to do that, right? But God, show me how good it can be in your family. Show me how good the qualities of your family can trickle down into my address, into my home with my children. And we really get to be a light. And I think I'm really confident that in this room there's so many ideas and resources and practices and habits that we can learn from each other, so we don't have to feel like we have to reinvent the wheel. Because one thing that I do feel like is bombarding us as parents, and me and Jordan were talking about this yesterday. I feel like moms are more on social media than dads. I don't know if that's true. Maybe that's why dads don't have dad guilt. Have you guys ever even heard that term? Dad guilt? No, it's because moms are like, you should be doing lymphatic massages and eating dietary, oh gosh, calm down. So I think with us, one of the things that we're fed is this idea that when parents are not intentional, the children set the culture of the home. And children really run the shop. You guys know what the culture of our home would be if children everything would be dinosaurs. I would roar for a living. They were we were in chicken nuggets and applesauce in pouches all day. And I just think about what comes natural to Camden or Caleb. Camden's 5, Caleb is 2. We were driving the other day, and then we were just quiet, because sometimes, I just need quiet. Out of nowhere, Cam goes, how does Spider-Man beat Venom? Isn't Spider... and I'm like, is that what you're thinking about right now? Is that where your head is at? And he started strong. He's like, I don't understand. We would be all over the place if they were the ones setting the pace, right? And one thing that I learned, just even sitting there, I just jotted this down from our little icebreaker, is as parents, we will do anything to give our children what they're asking for that we have the ability to give. We are 100% willing. Sometimes we're not 100% able. Cam is asking me, for Christmas last year, he said he wanted to go to space. And I was like, okay, let's add to the list. I would love to do that for you, but I am unable to do that for you, right? The cool thing about our Father, because we are children of God, is that He is willing and able. So what are we asking God on behalf of our families? What are we asking God on behalf of our children? Because He is our dad, right? Like, He wants to drive to 5 Walmarts to give you what you need, right? Like, He wants to make ice cream at 1 a.m. to make sure you wake up and He wants to do that, but what are we requesting of Him? Are we faithful in our request? And I wanted to bring this book up because I'm going to start reading this in February. And I just wanted to invite anyone who is interested to join me. This is not a book club. I'm not starting a text thread or an email. There's no check-in. You don't even have to tell me. Y'all got stuff to do, okay? But if you're interested, this is a really good book. It's called, I haven't read it, but I've been recommended it a million times. It's called Habits of a Household, Practicing the Story of God in Everyday Family Rhythms. And as we were, thinking about this service, I was like, I want to read this book. So if anyone is interested, you want to order this book, obviously if you read it, you want to share, I'm happy to text about it, but I don't want you to feel like this was like another email you were going to get. But yeah, I just want to encourage us to consider like what it would look like to capture the opportunity of a lifetime, because our children are the greatest role that we have on this earth, is to really, other than our partners, is to really raise them in the way that God calls us to.
Amen. Amen.